欢迎大家来到科园新生活苏醒系列讲座。今天演讲的主题是主要由 Dr. Scott Stoll 所主讲，逆转疾病的 Whole Food Plant-Based 的饮食。首先，我先来做一个自我介绍。我是 Gordon， 是一个环保工作者，也担任全职健康生活协会的理事长，协助科园新生活规划系列讲座。如果你参加后续的午休快充站的话，你也会在6月21号看到我。
我是 Ruby 王良玉，我的现职是一位口译人员以及瑜伽老师。
Ruby， 你担任上一场蔬食新力量的主持人，在塔托博士演讲的时候，你一直担任他的口译，包括今天的同步口译，加上这么多年的实践纯素生活的经验，你是否可以跟我们分享一下你亲身经历蔬食带给你的影响呢？
谢谢 Gordon。我今天有这个机会可以分享一下我的生活体验。在我更年轻的时候，在科技公司服务，那公司安排了高级健检，那我检查出全身多处有病变、有肿瘤，那需要做追踪的至少就有3个，所以的确我花了1年的时间跑进各种的大小医院去做检查。那结果我在12年前开始选择纯素饮食，肉蛋奶都不吃，蜂蜜不吃。在那个时候，我的出发心是比较基于保护生命，但没想到实践了几年后，我2颗很大的、相当大的子宫肌瘤不见了。那时候我还记得医生跟我说，不管你现在在做什么，你就继续做就对了。那我就开始保持一个好奇心，我就回想到困扰我很多年的这个乳房纤维囊肿，会不会是我在美国念大学的时候，那时候牛奶比水还便宜，我天天都喝牛奶。去欧洲出差快要10年的时间，常常去欧洲，就非常喜欢 cheese 跟冰淇淋。我想有一点点的关系，但是在这么多年后舒缓了以后，因为我改变了饮食，我还是基于好奇心，2年前去医院做了检查，医生也给我很多正面的回应，那也希望我不用再那么频繁的复诊了。因此，我第2阶段想要表达的是，那饮食习惯，哪怕你是已经吃素了，哪怕你已经吃了很多蔬食了，是不是有一些黄金组合需要检视一下，还是怎么样？那因此我想要分享，一开始呢，基于一个吃货，不管吃荤吃素的时候，我都很爱吃，所以第1阶段呢，我会比较寻找自己熟悉的味道。那到第2阶段呢，我自己回顾起来是过分的依赖会吃饱的东西，因为那时候的 vegan 餐厅不多，那我会太大量的吃了大豆食品啊，或是一些麸质过高的东西。到了一段时间之后，我发现我的身体好像在呼应我精神上跟心理上的一些转化。那我的身体好像开始会追求一些比较接近大地的东西，就是属于原型食物，或是有机的东西，没有化学物质的东西，比较抗氧化素高的东西。我现在才知道，像前几个礼拜呢，金融师兄Gordon 就看到我，我就小松菜啊、青松菜就拿着叶子就一直咬了。就洗干净就拿来吃了哦，所以我邀请各位能够保持开放好奇的心，在这场旅程上呢，花一点点时间做实验。也许当你下定决心的时候，会需要舍掉很多东西，但是不用担心，在门口等着你的是一个更大、更美丽的包裹，包括今天的演讲，我相信你会收获满满。谢谢各位。
非常谢谢 Ruby 亲身经历的分享，她的经历呢，跟我们今天演讲的主题也是息息相关。那现在呢，Dr. Scott Stoll 已经在线上跟我们在一起。Now Dr. Scott Stoll is joining us online live from Texas, USA. Dr. Scott Stoll, hi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am sincerely honored to be a part of this conference. Hello, Gordon and Ruby. Thank you for the invitation. And congratulations on this incredible platform that helps people to understand the power of their plate to not only transform their own health, but to transform the world around them and to bring the message of compassion with food that we eat. So congratulations, I'm honored and look forward to visiting with you today.
我们也同时呢跟医生挥个手，虽然他暂时看不到，但是我们会录影哦。好，那 Scott Stoll 呢，想要跟各位说，他非常的荣幸有这样的一个平台，能够他代表这个一个纯素的医生呢，能够传达这些讯息给到各位。不但是会影响到你的健康，也会影响到这个世界，同时呢，也会传达同理心给所有的万物。光只是透过植物的力量。
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. We will see you shortly in the Q&A live session. Thank you.
Thank you.
再来呢，我来介绍一下今天的这个讲座的这个流程。那是不是请看 PPT？ 在10点15开始到10点45 Q&A 的时候呢，各位可以将你的提问经由 YouTube 的提问区呢提出来。那工作人员呢会尽量的把它交给主持人发问这个 Dr. Scott Stoll。那现在呢，在正式演讲之前，我先来做一个介绍 Dr. Scott Stoll。Dr. Scott Stoll 呢，他是美国科罗拉多大学医学院的医学博士，而是一个物理医学和复健的认证专家。他其实是一个美国奥运的代表队。他在成为美国雪橇队员，参加1994的奥运会之后，他就一直担任美国雪橇队的队医。他呢也是 Plantation Project 中文暂时翻译成植育计划的共同创始人跟理事长。Plantation 不好翻译成中文，因为它是一个3个英文字的组合：植物、营养跟医生。也就是说，植物就是你的营养，植物就是你的医生。那他们就把这3个组合呢叫 Plantation。Plantation 呢也在美国有几个创举哈，他们在10几年前就开始成立了叫做 Plant-Based Healthcare Conference， 一个植物性饮食的医疗大会到现在10几年的时间，全世界最大的植物性的医疗大会。那参加的人数上千个医生跟医疗人员。那第二个呢是一个研究性质的期刊，它叫做 International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention。那这个期刊呢是一个非常非常专业的，希望能够改变医生的印象。那再来呢，它也是一个在显现在很多的纪录片包括 Dr. Oz， 还有包括2018公共电视台特别节目 Food as Medicine， 而且很多纪录片里面 Eating You Alive、Waiting Till It's Free， 还有非常著名的 The Game Changers 茹素的力量。茹素的力量呢，讲到许多知名的运动员表现很好，他就是用whole food plant-based 饮食。那畅销书作家、国际演说家，他出版了《Your Next Bite》，那也在最近呢出版了《Disease Reversal Hope》。那这一本书呢，才刚刚出版，下一页。在今年呢的下半年或者明年上半年，也会由织田来出版中文版。那纪录片现在正在美国拍摄当中。预计年底会在美国上映，那中文版呢，也希望能够在2023年上半在台湾上映。OK， 好，下一张。那现在呢，我们就正式开始这个，请 Dr. Scott Stoll 为我们做他精辟的演讲。那 Dr. Scott Stoll 呢，他曾经帮助过成千上万的人逆转疾病。恢复健康，可是呢，当病人健康之后，当医生的表面上看起来好像 业务跟收入都减少了，可是他却非常坚定的来帮助你、帮助我呢，来推广 whole food plant-based 的饮食，为的是爱，爱人民、爱土地、爱动物。他用专业、良知还有身体力行呢，来种下一颗改变的种子，希望能够改变这个世界。那让我们一起来参与这一场精彩的国际演讲，谢谢。
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Scott Stoll, co-founder of the Plantrition Project. And it is my honor today, at the invitation of Bliss and Wisdom, to present to you today Food as Medicine, a regenerative vision, really looking at the incredible power of a whole food plant-based diet to not only prevent, but suspend and reverse disease. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started right away. So as we dive in and begin to look at the research, we can begin to see that the dietary research is voluminous and it can be difficult to find our way through the research. However, today we're going to look through 7 different lenses to better understand the power of the food that we put on our plate, the power of a whole food plant-based diet on our plate, to not only prevent, but suspend and reverse disease. We're going to look through 7 different lenses at the power of the food on our plate today, starting with the biochemical level, the smallest level down to the atomic level, looking at inflammation, the epigenetic level, cellular biology, a study of complex biologic systems, randomized control trials, looking at population studies, and then finally understanding the power of the food on our plate to impact agriculture and the environment and the world that we're stewarding for future generations. But first, one of the most important ideas in medicine today is that through lifestyle, especially a whole food plant-based diet, we can prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. That's right. We can turn back the clock. We can undo much of the damage that has been done through our dietary choices that we often didn't understand we were making. But the power of the right food is that it gives our body the opportunity to heal. And I want to share with you at the start a story of a friend of mine. This is Marcy Madrid. She's the Vice President of Population Health at Midland Health Hospital in Midland, Texas. In 2014, Marcy was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She had a rapidly progressive case that included severe weakness, tingling numbness in her arms and legs. And she progressed to the place where she had failed multiple medications and was barely making it through the day. She would find her way through the workday and collapse on the couch at night. Her husband, Carlos, who's also pictured here on the left, had to pick up all of the extra work that needed to be done. He was cooking, cleaning, taking the kids to their activities. And he too was wondering, how are we going to survive this long term? Marcy was hopeless. She didn't know what to do. The neurologist didn't know what to do. I met Marcy in 2014 when I was invited to do a grand rounds at their hospital. I worked with both she and a surgeon at the hospital to introduce them to lifestyle medicine and the power of a plant-based diet to reverse disease. We can see on the left an MRI from her cervical region, and we can see here in the middle this structure is the spinal cord. And if you'll notice, all of the white elements inside of her spinal cord, these are inflammatory lesions. Essentially, her immune system is attacking her spinal cord. 6 months later on the right, we see that all the inflammation in her spinal cord has resolved. Similarly, we can look at the MRI of her brain. We see this large lesion in the right upper portion of her brain, just near the ventricle. 6 months later, that lesion is resolved. And as these lesions resolved, so too did her symptoms. Marcy was completely healed of multiple sclerosis. And now, nearly 7 years later, Marcy continues to be healed and resolved from her symptoms. And she is leading change in her hospital that includes the opening of a lifestyle medicine center. And so her transformation is not only a transformation that included resolved MRI findings, resolved symptoms, a diagnosis that is now in remission, but she has a healthy family and she's able to be present and involved in her children's lives. She's also now leading lifestyle medicine initiatives in and around Texas based upon her improvement. So we can see that the diet not only transforms the physical characteristics of the disease, it not only resolves the symptoms of disease, but it transforms a life and allows them to share their gift and impact the world. So let's dive in a little bit more and understand the power of our plate. Every day we put food on our plates and we eat with forks and knives or chopsticks or fingers, and we consume on average about 2,000 pounds of food in a year, the equivalent of this small car. So we're eating bumper to bumper some food that comes from somewhere that passes through our body. This is really a massive environmental exposure as the food passes from the outside through the inside of our body. We absorb the nutrients and whatever else was included in that food, and it becomes essentially a part of our body. Every bite has a profound impact on our health. Bite by bite, we're either inducing inflammation, injury, and harm, or we are healing and restoring our system. And so if we think about that plate, the plate is really at the center of a food web. It's not simply food that we put into our body where we're balancing calories, trying to balance 2,000 pounds of food or 86 million calories in a lifetime. It really is a interconnected web of impact or influence from our dietary choices. We are impacting not only our health, but as we saw with Marcy, influencing the people in our lives, our families, our colleagues, our friends, spiritual communities. We're impacting our work. We're impacting the way that we grow food, the way that we manage soil, the way that we demonstrate compassion to animals in the system. And we're impacting the world that we are really stewarding for future generations, all because of what we choose to put on our plate every single day. And what we put on our plate matters. It matters globally. These are statistics from the Global Burden of Disease study, which shows on the right that deaths related to non-communicable diseases are on the rise, from 60% in 2000 to nearly 74% on average, and it's increasing at faster rates in low-income countries. What are these non-communicable deaths? They're related to our lifestyle, including heart disease, lung disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. But it's not just deaths that are being impacted, it's the quality of life that's actually being impacted. And we see here on the left, the loss of healthy life years, or disability-adjusted life years. The leading cause of death and disability today in the world are non-communicable diseases, directly related to the way that we live our lives, the primary foundation of which is the food that we eat every single day. And what's happened over the last 100 years globally that is leading to this increased risk of disability and deaths is the transformation of our food system. Really a transformation that started in the 1940s and has escalated and accelerated globally. We can see here that beginning in 1909, the average person ate 5 pounds of sugar per person per year. Today, it's more than 140 pounds. We've added 70 pounds of oil, more than 100 pounds of meat and 15 pounds of fish, 30 pounds of cheese, 500 calories, and 53 gallons of soft drinks in a year per person. All of these foods are inflammatory and disrupt physiologic systems, leading to the progression of disease. But they also have a significant impact on the quality of life of animals and our environment, as we'll see later. So essentially, when we build on the right foundation, we have a strong tower of health. However, when we erode the foundations of our life through lifestyle choices and unhealthy food, medicine has to step in with surgery and medications to prop up the tower. This is not sustainable, and this is why quality of life is also impacted, because surgery and medications don't reverse the cause of the disease. They're only maintaining and managing the acceleration and progression of those diseases. So what we see is that disease accumulates over time. It's bite by bite that we accumulate injury inside of our cells. It's with fatigue, toxic exposure, sleeplessness and poor posture, diet and inactivity, that we begin to turn the wheels of accumulated injury. We begin to disrupt normal cellular function. We begin to impair organ function, leading to this eventual tipping point of disease. And the tipping point is an acute heart attack, diagnosis of cancer, elevated hemoglobin A1C with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And we can see that those diseases did not just appear in that time of the diagnosis, but they actually had their origins decades before in the lifestyle choices that people were making. This actually starts in childhood. And unfortunately today, because of the lifestyle that now has swept the globe, children are developing these same diseases. They're reaching the tipping point in their early teen years. In fact, it's not uncommon for children under 12 to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes today. Something that was once called adult onset diabetes now happens in children. Why? Because of the rapid accumulation of injury because of the lifestyle that is prevalent around the world today. Disease and health also spread through social networks, the connectivity of our communities. And we see that our communities impact our health. One U.S. study followed 12,000 people for 32 years and found that if you have a close friend who becomes obese, your chances of becoming obese increased by 171%. Part of that was found that when we eat with people who eat more, we eat more. And we're less likely to pay attention to our own cues because we're looking for acceptance within that community. So we look for cues about how to behave based upon what other people are doing. Similarly, studies have shown that when someone in the household quits, we have a 67% decreased chance of smoking. We're happier if we live near happy people. When we are married, we share microbial communities, the microbiome, which leads to greater diversity and richness in our microbial communities inside of our body, the microbiome, that improves our health. So this is just to touch on the fact that community is also important, and developing healthy communities is a part of the long-term solution. So these diseases are weeds, and we have to look to the source of the weed in order to get rid of it. So how do we get rid of weeds? We pull them out by the roots. The roots of the disease epidemic globally are lifestyle choices, and at the crucible of those choices is our diet. We have a global obesity epidemic. Healthcare is not equipped to manage the global epidemic. And so we need to go beyond healthcare solution. We need to look for dietary intervention in and through our communities to begin impacting the world. So let's start looking through our 7 lenses at the power of a plant-based diet to prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. We'll start with the smallest level, the atomic level, looking at electrons. Electron loss leads to inflammation, and when we have a single electron, it's called a free radical. Now, free radicals don't like to be unbalanced in the universe. The universe, balance is appreciated. It is one of the foundations, and so this unpaired electron is looking for a secondary electron to bring balance and stability. So as it's looking for a secondary electron, it passes through the outer membranes of cells, causing damage. It passes into the DNA of cells, causing damage, potentially leading to cancer. It even damages the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. And it continues to do so until it finds a connection. I like to think of this as finding a match for a sock, that when you have a single sock, you spend lots of time looking for that additional sock, and it creates chaos and confusion. The same is true for these electrons. Looking for another electron, it causes damage and confusion inside of the cells. This leads to chronic inflammation, which is one of the causes of disease. This is a busy slide, but just to point out that these free radicals, the reactive oxygen species we see here, turn on key inflammatory switches that we see in the middle, like NF-kappa beta, that leads to, at the bottom, cancer formation. It also can lead to heart injury to the arteries of the heart and heart disease, and worsening insulin resistance in the state of type 2 diabetes. Inflammation can come from many sources, including the outer coverings of bacteria called endotoxins. The consumption of animal products causes an exposure to these heat-resistant endotoxins that when people consume them, as we see here in this randomized control trial, within 2 to 4 hours, at the top we see a spike of inflammation, IL-6 and TNF-alpha, this massive spike at 2 hours. Inflammation is systemic, including the brain, and that's why we see similarly at the same peak of inflammation, social disconnectedness and depressed mood. Just to highlight the fact that exposure to these foods causes inflammation that finds its way into our brain and impacts the way that we feel and connect with our communities. All of this has been highlighted in the research in the Dietary Inflammation Index, and they have found that a higher dietary inflammatory index is associated with depression and mental illness, as we just saw, cardiovascular disease, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, excess body weight, increased weight to hip ratio, elevated VAT fat, visceral abdominal tissue, which is the fat around our organs that is dangerous because it contributes to chronic inflammation and disease. So these free radicals causing inflammation, as we can see here on the left, dietary and lifestyle factors, including coffee, wine, that damage the body and contribute to inflammation and the progression of disease. But it's mitigated by the anti-inflammatories in food. And every rich meal of food is full of phytochemicals, antioxidants that immediately turn off key inflammatory switches throughout the body. So the polyphenols, or the phytochemicals, which make the beautiful colors of those plants that we just saw, it's the anthocyanins in berries, and the greens and the beautiful beans that we saw. Those polyphenols actually turn off and mitigate the effects of these reactive oxygen species, or these free radicals. They also turn off key switches. The polyphenols and the antioxidants that we see in the blackberries and greens turn off this key switch of NF-kappa beta. And when NF-kappa beta is turned off, it impacts more than 400 genes in the inflammatory cascade that have all been associated in the literature with a host of diseases that impact our world today. However, there's another opportunity. There's multiple ways by which a wonderful meal like the salad turns off inflammation. The bacteria in our gut, part of the microbiome, are able to digest some of the fiber in that salad, and they produce a byproduct called butyrate. It's like the garbage out the back of the chemical plant as they're eating fiber on the front end. That garbage is used by our body. It's the most efficient recycling system available. It takes that garbage, the short chain fatty acids like butyrate, and it actually begins to use them throughout our body to stabilize blood sugars, reduce inflammation. In this case, the butyrate turns off the key inflammatory switch again. So from multiple angles, we are reducing inflammation and mitigating the damage that's done from our environment. And the type of fruits and vegetables also matter. This was an interventional trial looking at low quality versus high quality fruits and vegetables. The low quality simply being the lighter colored fruits and vegetables, the high quality, more rich in those polyphenols and antioxidants that we saw in the previous slide. And they found that over the course of 2 weeks, people that were on a high quality diet had a more dramatic reduction in inflammation compared to those on a low antioxidant diet. So kind of scaling into the next level, from the molecular to the DNA level, epigenetics. First, this is a picture of a chromosome. It houses our genetic material. And if you remember, we get 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 chromosomes from dad that join together in the middle to make the unique blueprint that is you. And there's only one you that will ever be designed in history. So that unique genetic material becomes your chromosomes. The little green caps on the end of this chromosome are called telomeres. And we have an enzyme called telomerase that maintains the integrity of those caps. With inflammation, with chronic disease, with stress, with aging, those caps can actually shrink at a more rapid rate. So it's important to recognize that while we receive DNA and genetics from our parents, we may receive susceptibilities for disease, but genetics are not the major cause of chronic disease. In fact, according to this study and many others, on average, all of disease is related to genetics at about an 8% ratio. Cancer can be between 8 to 18%, depending on the type of cancer. But essentially, most diseases have only about a 10% relationship to an individual's genetics. The remaining 90% is related to their lifestyle choices on a daily basis. So in other words, we could inherit a very poor genetic profile that makes us very susceptible to a host of lifestyle diseases. But by choosing to eat a whole food plant-based diet, reduce stress, exercise, get a good night's sleep, and be a part of a loving community, those genetic factors, those concerning susceptibilities never have to manifest in our life. We control our destiny by our lifestyle choices and by the decisions that we make about what we put on our fingers, forks, and chopsticks. So this is the field of epigenetics that says we inherit genes from our parents, but our lifestyle choices matter more. And in this image, we can see on the right that the lifestyle choices, essentially a westernized lifestyle of ultra-processed food, animal products, inactivity, stress, poor sleep patterns, all lead to the manifestation of disease. On the other hand, healthy lifestyle factors lead to a healthy body and a changed future. Dr. Dean Ornish proved this in his research when they looked at a lifestyle intervention that included a whole food plant-based diet. We can see that they were able to positively impact more than 500 genes, turning on 48 and off 453 genes in a 12-week period of time. They also showed and demonstrated a 30% increased activity of telomerase. Essentially, it lengthened the telomeres in the course of 12 weeks. So really, we could say that they were turning back the clock on aging, reversing aging, simply by intervening with a lifestyle that included whole food plant-based diets. Also, epigenetically, we see a significant impact as our microbiome digests the fiber in the plants. All plants contain resistant starches and fibers that are not able to be digested and utilized by our digestive system. However, the bacteria love some of these fibers. They chew up the fibers, they use them as a food, and as I mentioned earlier, they produce waste products, short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, that are absorbed by our body. They act locally to heal the gut, reduce the risk of cancer, reduce inflammation in the gut, but they're also released systemically. And they have this amazing effect on our genes. We can see that They have a genetic effect reducing the risk of cancer by reducing the expression of VEGF, which is directly tied to growing blood vessels into cancer cells, which accelerates their growth. They have an anti-inflammatory effect, as we saw, both with NF-kappa beta and inhibiting the key step cancer progression, mTOR. They have impact on insulin resistance and obesity. They downregulate 9 genes involved in the cholesterol biosynthesis. They have a neuroprotective effect, actually increasing the growth of new brain cells. They enhance our immune system's ability to fight infections, and they actually activate stem cells. Short-chain fatty acids turn on our stem cells to begin regenerating tissue all throughout the body. So we look at cellular function now. As we dive in, outside of the nucleus into the cell, we also see the impact on mitochondria, as I mentioned earlier. These are the powerhouses of the cell. And a plant-based diet has a profound impact on these mitochondria. They assist the mitochondria in maintaining antioxidant levels, these glutathione levels, which again reduces inflammation, reduces some of the inflammatory impact of just normal metabolic activity. They help to regulate cellular activity, they protect the DNA, and it's amazing that a whole food plant-based diet improves the efficiency and the number of mitochondria. This is called biogenesis. And this happens through, that epigenetic mechanism. As we're eating those beautiful plants, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's upregulating the gene PGC1 alpha that is turning on the cellular machinery to grow more mitochondria, which increases the efficiency, the energy production of our body, which gives us more energy, more endurance throughout the course of the day. This is one of the reasons that more and more athletes are choosing a whole food plant-based diet, because they notice and they see the difference in their performance through the production of more mitochondria. We also see at the cellular level, plants reduce the formation of fat inside of our cells, particularly in muscle and liver. This intracellular lipid that we see here is directly related to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Plants reduce the levels of IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 has been related to high cancer rates. And in fact, eating more meat increases IGF-1 levels, and meat has actually been associated as an equal to tobacco smoke in the formation of cancer, but plants diminish that. Plants normalize leptin and adiponectin levels, kind of a teeter-totter of appetite and balance. They reduce mTOR activation and cancer risk. They inhibit neuroinflammation or inflammation in the brain, and they protect against cancer. Very powerful, bite by bite. As we step out now and look at complex biological systems, these are organizations of cells that are performing amazing things. And this is a picture, actually, of blood vessel growth inside of our body. And the blood vessel growth is called angiogenesis. It's a critical element in our body. It's a normal system. We grow blood vessels into damaged tissue that after the healing has occurred, the blood vessels die back. But when the system is disrupted, as we see here, we can have too much blood vessel growth, which grows cancers, leads to autoimmune diseases like psoriasis, arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, obesity. Or we can have too little growth of blood vessels, again leading to chronic wounds, neuropathies, sick nerves. Even erectile dysfunction is impaired or insufficient angiogenesis. It's this beautiful, on the left, you can see it's the beautiful arborization pattern, just like a tree growing these amazing blood vessels, turned on and turned off by the right epigenetic markers. As we're eating foods like berries, these antioxidants or phytochemicals inside of the berries, the anthocyanins and the phenolics, again, they inhibit that key step in the growth of blood vessels for cancer, VEGF, and have both an anti-inflammatory effect and an anti-angiogenic effect, essentially cutting off blood vessel growth to cancer and starving cancer. They did a large study looking at the foods that optimize or normalize angiogenesis, preventing the abnormal growth of blood vessels into the host of diseases that we saw previously, while at the same time allowing the normal growth of blood vessels into areas that needed more blood supply, resolving things like neuropathies and erectile dysfunction. And we can see as we look at this list that was completed by the Angiogenesis Foundation, that it's all the foods that we would choose, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, including the all-powerful spices like turmeric, ginger, ginseng, and other herbs, and foods like mushrooms, which have a profound impact on cancer. But also, as we look at complex biologic systems, we need to take a step back and understand the gut microbiome. The microbiome is 50 to 100 trillion bacteria that live inside of our intestines. These microbes are very important for our health, and they're very sensitive to our lifestyle choices. Here we see that plant protein encourages the growth of positive bacteria like Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, and it reduces the growth of bad bacteria, the bad actors like Bacteroides and Clostridium. And in doing so, we produce more of those short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, as we saw earlier, which reduces inflammation and heals our gut lining, reducing the risk of autoimmune diseases, boosting our immune system, allowing us to fight more infections effectively. This meta-analysis review of 188 studies found that it's been shown that a high-fat diet adversely affects several bacteria, which are associated with healthy metabolic states. So eating more animal protein, eating more fat, causes a disruption in the microbiome, leading to diseases like irritable bowel disease and cardiovascular disease through the production of these inflammatory markers like TMAO. So when we feed our microbiome more plants, we can see all of the different improvements throughout our body. It has an impact on our mind through the gut-brain axis, actually improving cognitive processes, improving mood, emotional health. It has an impact reducing glucose, increasing insulin sensitivity. It reduces LDL cholesterol and improves production of short-chain fatty acids. It reduces all-cause mortality. It's associated with stabilizing blood sugars over the course of 4 hours. And the microbiome actually can leave the gut and find its way to our joints. And new research is showing the gut-joint axis, that when we have a healthy microbiome in our gut, we have a healthy microbiome in our joints, which supports the growth and the maintenance of healthy cartilage. I'd just like to share another story of a woman named Kelly, who I met at one of our health immersions. She was in her early 30s, and she's the one on the left with the pink hat. When she came to our immersion, she was tired, depressed, overweight, high blood pressure, thyroid disease, exhaustion, infertility, elevated cholesterol. Her husband had severe ulcerative colitis and was awaiting surgery. She learned about the power of a plant-based diet. They went home and applied it in their lifestyle. And here we see them a little more than a year later. Kelly was able to completely resolve all of her conditions. Did so well that she got promoted. As we can see, her husband is happy. He was able to cancel his surgery because his ulcerative colitis had resolved. And they overcame infertility. And we see in the middle this beautiful life that came out of the healing of her body. Now, as we look at some of the randomized control trials, and this is just a very high level, there are thousands of studies now documenting the benefits of a plant-based diet on health. These are just a few highlights. Kind of a summary of randomized control trials for plant-based diets. We can see that people on a plant-based diet had greater sustained weight loss, both at 1 and 2 years. Improved beta cell function, the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. improved cholesterol and lipid levels, improved depression and anxiety scores, improved peripheral neuropathy, improvement in ulcerative colitis patients at 12 weeks, and greater production of those all-important short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. This is from Dr. Dean Ornish's Lifestyle Heart Trial, where he utilized a plant-based diet as an intervention against cardiovascular disease. At 1 year, they say 91% regression of chest pain or angina versus the control group that was utilizing the American Heart Association diet that experienced a 165% increase. On the right, we see a deficit in the top, deficit of blood flow to the lower portion of the heart, secondary to coronary artery disease, heart disease. Within just 3 weeks of a lifestyle intervention and a whole food plant-based diet, we see that the blood flow has been restored to that portion of the heart. Essentially, those blood vessels healed, produced nitric oxide, increased the blood flow, plaques may have been resolved, and the heart received blood, allowing it to heal. Similarly, through angiography, we can see in both of these images reduced blood flow. On the left, we see the constricted area, and on the right, in picture B, we again see the constricture, this restricted flow of blood that's occurred from coronary artery disease. After the utilization of a plant-based diet, we can see both on the left-hand side and in image B that those restricted areas have now opened up and blood flow is restored to the heart that was experiencing reduced flow because of the constriction, because of the damage done through dietary excess. This is only possible through a whole food plant-based diet. What about type 2 diabetes? Here are just a few studies that highlight the impact of a plant-based diet. I love this study because it was a randomized control trial comparing a vegetarian diet, essentially whole food plant-based, with the American Diabetes Association diet, the diet that is prescribed to everyone with type 2 diabetes. So we can see the comparisons here. The ADA diet is the darker bar, the vegetarian diet is the lighter colored bar. So there was a greater reduction in medications on the vegetarian diet, weight, and improved insulin sensitivity, both all in the vegetarian group compared to the ADA diet. In the experimental group, we see they also had improved insulin sensitivity, improved adiponectin and leptin, which reduces appetite and storage of fat. We see a reduction in visceral and subcutaneous fat, improved vitamin C and superoxide dismutase levels, and reduced glutathione, which tells us that the inflammatory levels were reduced. Glutathione is an antioxidant, so if your body is utilizing less, it's having to cope with less inflammation. And in the ADA group, none of these positive secondary benefits were seen. Again, emphasizing the importance of whole plant foods in treating disease. So as we look more at larger trials for type 2 diabetes, this is a systematic review which looks at multiple trials. Based upon the evidence of the research in the systematic review, it can be concluded that plant-based diets accompanied by educational intervention significantly improve psychological health, quality of life. Hemoglobin A1C is essentially the measure of blood sugar over 3 months, and weight. Plant-based diets could potentially improve neuropathic pain. And there's research to show that in 25 days, 81% of people can dramatically improve the pain of peripheral neuropathy. The broad study from New Zealand was the first study to show significant improvements not only in BMI, cholesterol, and other risk factors, but also the greatest sustained weight loss at 6 and 12 months at any other trial that did not limit energy intake or mandate regular exercise, simply eating whole food plant-based diet. This is a summary of the plant-based diets on cholesterol levels. And we see that nearly all of the studies that have been done to date show dramatic reductions in total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol. More effective, in fact, in many studies than the use of medications. This was a great study looking at corporate settings and the opportunity to utilize a plant-based diet as a means of improving the health of employees. Geico is a large insurer in the United States, and it was a multi-center randomized controlled trial of plant-based diets to reduce body weight cardiovascular risk ratios. In this randomized controlled trial, there was a significant improvement in body weight, plasma lipids, and blood sugar control among people living with diabetes. They were much greater in the intervention group than the control group. Also in the Geico study, there was evidence of improved presenteeism, people going to work and producing more at work and having greater job satisfaction. So it not only improved the quality of their life and work, but it reversed their diseases at the same time. Now again, looking at some larger meta-analyses, this is from JAMA 2016. We see that high animal protein intake was positively associated with cardiovascular mortality. High plant intake was inversely associated. So more plants, lower risk, especially among individuals with one lifestyle risk factor. One of the great nutritional deficits, both here and internationally now, is fiber. And this research shows that only 4% of any age group actually meets the adequate intake for fiber. In America, we see that only 4% of males and females reach the recommendations of 35 and 25 grams. Ideally, as the research shows, that we should be out around 70 grams to maximize our risk reduction. So essentially, no one today is getting enough fiber unless you're eating a whole food plant-based diet. And here's the research again that shows risk of heart disease across increasing levels of total fiber intake. So we see that with increasing intake of plants, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as we add more fiber to our diet, that relative risk of heart disease almost reaches zero as we increase our plant intake. Similarly, when we improve the quality of our diet, not only reducing and eliminating animal products, but also improving our exposure to whole plant foods, we dramatically improve our health. This is from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, which highlights the effect of a healthy plant-based diet here on the left in red versus a plant-based diet and an unhealthy plant-based diet. And we can see the hazard ratios, the risk of heart disease actually goes up with an unhealthy plant-based diet, but we get the maximal benefits when we eat whole plant foods. On the right, we see in red animal foods and a less healthy plant-based diet almost rising at the same level for risk of heart disease, but we see a dramatic improvement with healthy plant foods. So again, the quality of our diet really does matter, and filling our plate, those 2,000 pounds a year, with whole plant foods is a significant opportunity to prevent, suspend, and reverse disease. Similarly, we look at diabetes, and we see that in green, the healthy plant-based diet more significantly reduces the risk of diabetes compared to an unhealthy plant-based diet. So quality, again, matters. What about inflammation? We saw earlier, inflammatory index is important. And so here, this is again a meta-analysis, systematic review looking at hundreds of studies. They found that plant-based diets are associated with improvement in obesity-related inflammatory profiles and could provide means for therapy and prevention of chronic disease risk. And so it's the antioxidants, as we saw earlier, that are donating electrons to reduce the effects, turning off switches like NF-kappa beta to resolve inflammation. And so another general measure in the research to look at the power of your diet in reducing disease is the total antioxidant capacity. How many antioxidants are you getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner, building them up inside of your body? And they found that a high total antioxidant capacity is inversely related to, so that means higher antioxidants, lower rates of all-cause mortality, stroke, hypertension, colon cancer, cataract formation, anxiety, depression because of neuroinflammation and the microbiome, multiple sclerosis, myocardial infarction, heart attack in women. It's protective against metabolic risk factors and actually leads to a lower risk of hip fracture in the elderly. So now we've scaled from the smallest level, the atomic level with electrons, up through our genes and our cells and biologic systems. We've seen the positive impacts on randomized control trials. We have also looked at the evidence through meta-analyses and systematic reviews of population impacts of these different of plant-based diets on different diseases. But what about now hospital systems? You know, healthcare is really now currently disease management, but what if we began to shift more towards utilizing food as medicine? This is Dr. David Feinberg, CEO of Geisinger Health, who said while he was CEO there, we should be investing in people and processes, not in hospitals, understanding the power of lifestyle to transform individuals, communities, and healthcare systems. And so they did. They invested in a project called Fresh Food Pharmacy. And to prove out their intervention, they developed a study which identified patients with a hemoglobin A1C of greater than 8. So this is poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, but also a group of people who self-identified with food insecurity. So they found in their community that 14% of the population, 23% of the children identified with food insecurity. They weren't able to access healthy food. Then they went back into the claims data, the insurance data on these patients, and found that on average, this large group of people had $8,000 to $12,000 per month in expenses to the hospital. So they put together an educational program that included food and a team working with these individuals to help intervene and prevent and suspend type 2 diabetes. So the group they selected, 37 patients for 12 months to prove out their pilot study, had an A1C of 9.6, which is very poorly controlled type 2 diabetes. 1 year later, their A1Cs were 7.5%, which corresponded really to a 40% decreased risk of death and serious consequences. Dramatic reduction. They were able to reduce their mean healthcare costs by 80%, essentially moving from $240,000 per member per year to $48,000 per member per year. Think about the cost savings in healthcare if this could be replicated across systems around the world. They predict on average that there's an $8,000 to $12,000 of savings per 1% reduction in A1C. Dramatic reductions and dramatic improvements in quality of life for everybody passing through the program. The program was so successful, it was written up in Harvard Business Review, and is being reproduced in multiple sites throughout their region of care. Now we can go a step bigger, expanding beyond healthcare systems to understand the impact of the food that we put on our plates every single day, the healing capacity and potential of a whole food plant-based diet to heal from the molecular level to the global level. So let's look at the agriculture and environment. So first we have to take stock of our food supply chain. And you all may know this, but this is animal feeding operations today. They call them CAFOs, Certified Animal Feeding Operations. And they exploit animals. They put animals in terrible living situations. And it has not only an effect on the well-being of the animal, but also the workers and the environment that is negatively impacted by cramming all of these living creatures into tight living quarters, under stressful living environments, all to be sacrificed for food. More than 10 billion animals are sacrificed for food here in the United States. And the amount of resources required to grow those animals is actually draining the resources of our planet. It's most people don't realize that 80% of all of the antibiotics that are being manufactured today are sold to animal food production. You know, only 15% or so are utilized by humans. So the number one cause of antibiotic resistance is not the the physician's prescription pad. Rather, it's the animal feeding operations and the animal food that people are eating. So antibiotics are given to farm animals to promote growth and prevent disease. The animals eat those antibiotics and they grow, but because of the continued exposure, the bacteria that are in their guts begin to develop resistance to those antibiotics. They contaminate the meat, the individual consumes the meat, and develops the antibiotic resistance that was carried by those bacteria. Now, when they do come down with an infection, the physician writes a prescription, gives it to the patient, but the patient has no impact because they develop resistance from the food chain. Now we also see the impact on land from the growth of animals, or this idea that we have to eat animals. More than 80% of our farmland is used for livestock, but it only produces 18% of the food calories and 37% of the protein. This is data that comes from one of the largest studies to date that included 38,700 farms, 119 countries, 40 food products, representing 90% of what we eat. And if we step back and really look at our food supply chain, 75% of the calories in the entire world come from 12 plants and 5 animals. And so we can see that, not only are we producing only 18% of the calories, 37% of the protein, while using 80% of the farmland, we're utilizing 83% of the land, emitting 58% of the greenhouse gases, contributing to water pollution, air pollution, and freshwater withdrawals at unsustainable levels. The food system is broken. And then growing the food to feed the animals through conventional practices today is leading to erosion around the world. We're losing topsoil at exponential rates. It's been estimated that we're losing 1 inch of topsoil per year. And then unless we change the way that we grow food, then we have 60 harvests left. 60 years, 60 inches of topsoil remaining. The good news is that by changing the pattern of the way that we grow food, we can actually regenerate soil and regenerate the earth. So looking at diet and resource sustainability, we can see on the sustainability score and the health score that the vegan diet is superior. Greatest sustainability and greatest health score. The Lancet trial and paper was written in 2019 by lead author Dr. Walter Willett from Harvard University. He said a transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. Global consumption of fruits and vegetables, nuts and legumes will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%. Now, this is a wonderful first step, but by 2050 we need to do better. He says a diet rich in plant-based foods and with fewer animal sources confers improved health and environmental benefits. But we need to go further and we need to go faster. in order to save lives and to save our planet. One of my favorite quotes is by author Stephen Covey. And he said this: "To learn and not to do is really not to learn. To know and not to do is really not to know." And so we all have learned this information today. We've seen the impact of a whole food plant-based diet, a plate filled with beautiful, delicious plants that changes our bodies from the molecular level through the system level, giving us vitality, health, energy, mental clarity, and the ability to share our gift with the world. We've seen that groups of people transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet can begin to change the economics of healthcare, allowing more finances to be available to provide healthcare for all. We've seen that a system and a community moving towards plant-based diets can begin to regenerate agriculture and the earth and restore compassion to animals. And so we've learned these things today, but we need to do. We need to know how to move forward. The first step is beginning to transform our own plates, adding more plants, going towards a whole food plant-based diet. We need to begin growing our own food. We need to begin helping others grow their own food to bring food security and health into their lives. We need to begin initiating and establishing programs in low-income countries where the rise in non-communicable diseases and cancer is exponential. They need to learn how to grow food and how to establish themselves in a place where they have both food security and food that brings life and health. So we have lots to do as a group. And so it's my sincere hope that not only has this been inspiring and educational to you, but through this process, you'll begin getting ideas of ways that you can begin impacting your family, your community, and your region. Because we really are stewarding our lives, our resources, and this entire globe for the future generations. We have to move from thinking of ourselves individually and to begin thinking of ourselves collectively. We need to move from thinking of ourselves as we've been trained by the world as consumers and producers, actually stewards. And the stewardship mindset causes us to think in the future of how we can better hand off this world, its resources, to the next generation. This beautiful, bright-eyed generation that we can educate and inspire to be better stewards of the world that they will hand off to the generations that follow. I sincerely thank you for this amazing opportunity to be with you, and encourage you all to make a different choice, to eat a whole food plant-based diet and be inspired. If you, I just want to put this up, if you want more information, the Plantrition Project is our not-for-profit to educate healthcare providers around the world. You can find more information, plantritionproject.org. We have an annual conference, pbnhc.com, which is both live and virtual, designed for healthcare providers. We have 23 CME educational hours by healthcare providers to describe the health benefits of a plant-based diet. We have a free journal that you can sign up for today, ijdrp.org, to look at the science of plant-based nutrition. It's called the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention. And we are building out an international directory of healthcare providers, plantbaseddocs.com. So again, I'd just like to thank Bliss and Wisdom, Gordon Yu, my friend in Taiwan, for this kind invitation. And I look forward to hopefully visiting you all in Taiwan one day. I wish you all the best. As I always say to my children, I encourage them every single day that they leave the house to go out and speak life, to show love, to shine their light, and to share their gift and to change the world. And I encourage you to do the same. Thank you.
非常感谢 Dr. Scott Stoll 带来精彩的演讲，因为他在演讲当中用到了很多稍微深奥一点的生化或者医学名词，所以让我在这边花几分钟来做一个简单的摘要。怎么样透视呢？植物性饮食如何可以抑制，还可以逆转疾病？那第一个层面呢，从生物化学来看，从最小的原子或分子层次开始，体内有不平衡的电子，或者称为自由基，它在找寻配对的时候，会穿过细胞膜，伤害到 DNA 或者粒线体，就导致持续性的发炎。如果使用动物性产品的话，会加速这个程序，以至于造成持续性发炎或疾病。那如果用 whole food plant-based 的话，其中的植化素跟抗氧化剂就能够关闭遍布全身的发炎开关。植化素当中的多酚呢，会抑制和缓解自由基的影响。那第二个层次呢，就上升到下一章到 epigenetic， 就是表观遗传学的这个层面，就是放大到 DNA 染色体跟基因。其实疾病跟遗传遗传基因的关联性只有10%，其他的90% 跟生活方式的选择有关系。Dr. Dean Ornish 博士的研究正是这一点。他在导入 whole food plant-based 12周之后，对500多个基因产生正面的影响了，开启48个基因，关闭453个基因，端粒的活性及长度都增加，也就是抑制及逆转衰老、发炎、慢性病的形成。那在肠道呢的微生物群消化植物中的纤维，会产生废弃物叫丁酸盐，这丁酸盐被身体吸收，减低发炎。那在局部来讲呢，它是增加肠道的健康，它也能够释放到全身。释放到全身的结果呢，就会抑制癌症恶化的关键因子，强化免疫力，活化干细胞，启动组织再生。那第三个层面呢，是细胞生物学。那植物性的饮食能够协助粒线体维持抗氧化剂、谷胱甘肽的水准，因而降低发炎现象，有助于调节细胞的活动，保护 DNA， 提高粒线体的效能跟数量。这个叫做生元说。那更多更有效率的粒线体会增加身体制造能量的效应。这个就是越来越多的运动员呢，开始转向 whole food plant-based 饮食。吃肉跟癌症形成的关联性，跟抽烟致癌的关联性是一模一样的。但使用植物可以减轻这个现象。每一口咬食都会有力的抑制发炎及保护我们抗癌。那第四个呢，就到了复杂的生物系统。血管在我们体内受损的组织会生成，当疗愈发生之后，血管就坏死了。那这种机制叫血管新生。血管如果生长的太多、过度生长的话，会导致癌细胞的生长，或引发自体免疫性疾病。但是它如果生长不足呢，它会导致慢性伤口神经病变或者勃起功能障碍。这些神奇的血管由表观遗传机制控制它们的开关。我们吃的植物呢，饮食会抑制体内释放血管内皮生长因子，阻止血管内癌细胞的生长，同时具有抗发炎和抗血管生成的功效。如果摄取越多的动物蛋白、脂肪，会破坏肠道微生物群的功能，导致肠道跟心血管疾病。植物性饮食能够让我们在4个小时内有效的稳定血糖，促进软骨生长跟维护。透过肠脑轴线，它会影响我们的心理健康，强化认知历程，并改善情绪。那第5个呢？什么样是实际的状况？用随机对照试验来看， Dr. Dinonish 的生活方式跟心脏关系的试验，利用植物性饮食干预法来疗愈40个心血管疾病个案。1年之后，患者表示胸痛或心绞痛减轻了91%。相较之下，如果使用美国心脏协会饮食建议的对照组，胸痛或心绞痛的几率会增加了165%。那第6呢，是做一个流行病学的综合分析，把植物性饮食跟肥胖相关炎症的改善有关，并能够为慢性病的风险提供治疗跟预防的方法。综合发现呢，高总抗氧化能力跟疾病有负面的关联，也就是说，抗氧化物含量越高，总死亡率就越低。那如果我们开始试着用食物来取代药物呢？这个就是 Fresh Food Pharmacy 鲜食为药农场计划，进行12个月的研究之后，患者的死亡率风险就大大降低了，而且平均降低了80%的医疗费用，对每个参与者生活品质也得到显著的改善，并且成功复制在他们照护范围内的许多地点。哈佛商业评论也提到这个计划非常的成功。那第4个是非常大的议题农业跟环境。那我们科研新生活的舒适新力量也有好几个讲者关于这个议题呢做更多的分析。那我把他的结论，下一张。那他引用哈佛大学公共卫生学院教授Walter Willett 的结论，这个结论呢是全球16个国家37个主要的学者提出来的建言，在2050年前转变为健康饮食，需要显著的饮食改变。全球的蔬果、坚果、豆类的摄取必须增加1倍，红肉和糖的摄取必须减少50%以上。富含植物性且只有少许动物性的饮食，不但可以改善健康，也饶益环境。那这份报告的主笔者呢，Dr. Walter Willett， 他本身不是 vegan， 他在今年的3月跟我有一些对谈。如果各位想知道的话，6月21号可以继续参加这个苏醒的系列的活动。那现在呢，我们看见Dr. Scott Stoll 已经在线上参加我们的直播。那在他的演讲里头有提到好几个采用 Whole Food Plant-Based 让逆转疾病恢复健康的故事。其实他接触到成千上万的这样的这个患者，那他把其中30几位呢的故事写成一本书。那这本书呢叫做《逆转疾病的希望》。那我们现在呢，希望Dr. Scott Stoll 呢能够为我们来做一点简单的英文版的介绍。Dr. Scott Stoll, would you please to briefly introduce the book of Disease Reversal Hope?
Yes, thank you, Gordon. You know, for over 20 years, I have seen remarkable stories of transformation as people change the food on their plate. And so my co-author, Dan Purgis, and I wanted to capture some of these stories to help inspire hope in other people that might be faced with one of these diseases, to recognize that by changing the food on their plate, there is the profound potential to not only suspend their disease, but reverse their disease and reclaim their quality of life. So we have captured 36 stories from a variety of diseases, from heart disease to cancer to autoimmune diseases, in this book, told by the people themselves in their own words. So you can hear their story, you can understand what they did, and how they overcame their disease.
Thank you, Dr. Scott Stoll. Appreciate that. Now we started to have the Q&A session. The first question is, what's the differences of whole food plant-based diet with vegan diet?
Yes, and today this is more important than ever. As more people around the globe are recognizing that plant-based diets are healthy and actually becoming interesting to the public, we have more and more processed plant-based foods. And so the research is showing that if we eat a processed vegan diet or a processed plant-based diet, we have the same disease risk as those that are consuming a Western diet. Same risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer. So I like to distinguish between vegan and whole food plant-based diet by really emphasizing what we should be eating, which is whole plant foods, as minimally processed as possible, and looking like they just came out of the ground or off the tree or out of the field. And so I think that's really important. That's where we find disease reversal. That's where we find the health benefits are in the whole foods. The more that we process any food, including plants, the more detrimental it becomes to our bodies.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stoll. The second question is, tofu is a very common food in Taiwan. Do you consider tofu is a processed food? Is it beneficial to our health? Is that categorized as a whole food plant-based? Thank you.
Tofu is a great addition to any plant-based plate. Soy products, were once demonized by many people, thinking they had adverse effects on our health. But we know that soy products, including tofu, tempeh, and even the pre-tofu step, edamame, have incredible benefits for our health. They block receptors and actually lower the risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and prostate cancer in both men and women. They stabilize hormones and can add, through the soy isoflavones, a great source of antioxidants to the body. So I typically recommend that people add 2 or 3 servings of tofu, edamame, or tempeh to their diets on a weekly basis.
Thank you. The third one is high fat seems not good for our body, and cooking oil contains lots of fat. Is there any good oil you will recommend which has potential to benefit our health?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Oil is always a challenge. If we look historically, back in the 1900s, the average person ate about 4 pounds of oil in a year. Today, we're eating 74 pounds of oil per person per year. So we've added a tremendous amount of oil. And one of the challenges with all oils, including avocado oil, olive oil, those that are considered more healthy, is all of them contain 120 calories per tablespoon or 4,000 calories per pound. So it becomes a very calorie-packed source of potential weight gain. And the challenge with the oils is that we often don't measure them correctly. We don't add just a tablespoon to our food. It's usually multiple tablespoons. And in my experience, I've found that people add typically 4 to 5 or 6 tablespoons to their diet every day from a variety of sources of oils, which can be upwards of 700 additional calories, more than half of the calories for a woman coming from oil on a daily basis. So typically what I recommend is that we minimize all oils. If there's a small amount of extra virgin olive oil that ends up in your food occasionally, that's probably okay. But because of the calorie density of oils, it's better to minimize them, especially when we look at the global statistics on weight. Removing calorie density is important.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. What's your opinion about the popular plant-based meat, such as Beyond Meat? What you're thinking about that?
Yes, we have seen an incredible rise in plant-based meats. Beyond Meat was the company that really launched this into the public consciousness, and lots of people are moving to plant-based meats. There is some inherent value in the plant-based meats. When we think about compassion towards animals, they save a lot of animal lives. When we think about the impact on the planet, as we talked about in the lecture, and the agricultural impact of raising cattle, there's a significant agricultural and environmental impact. They also can serve as a bridge for many people, an introduction into plant-based world, and can help people consciously see that moving into a plant-based diet may not be as difficult as they once thought. So it's an introduction and a bridge. And in fact, fourth, if we look at some of the studies from Stanford, there is a lower inflammatory load on the body when consuming plant-based meats like Beyond Meat compared to beef. So a number of positive benefits. However, it's still a processed food, and so all of these processed foods need to be kind of compartmentalized and minimized. So if it becomes a part of a celebration, a barbecue, occasionally, that's totally fine. But consuming these on a daily basis, again, it's part of that processed, unhealthy plant-based diet. If they become a regular part of your diet, they may impair your health long-term.
Thank you. Dr. Stoll, we heard you have a clinic or program which have helped many people. What's the effectiveness of such clinic program? If some of our participants want to fly to USA to ask your help, it may not be so realistic. What you will recommend for such participants?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, Gordon. And something that I've always been trying to do is find ways to reach more people and even reproduce myself. So, initially I had my clinic as a physician, and I could only see, 20 to 30 people a day. So I was then invited by Whole Foods to start doing health immersions, where we bring in 100 people for a week, and I teach them all week, and we feed them a 100% whole food plant-based diet. And in that week, we see so many dramatic changes that we actually have to hire another doctor to take people off medications because people get so well so quickly. So we're still doing health immersions. We do them in the United States. And in 2023, we'll start doing them in the United Arab Emirates. So a little closer to Taiwan if people are interested. And they can follow that for more information on drscottstoll.com. But another resource that we created through the Plantrition Project is the directory called plantbaseddocs.com. This is a directory of healthcare providers like myself who utilize a whole food plant-based diet to help prevent and suspend disease. And many of them also practice telehealth. So that is a great resource for people in Taiwan, in China, anywhere in the world to find a healthcare provider where they can log on and via telehealth, communicate with them and allow the doctor to assist them in transitioning their diet and managing their medications. So those are several ways that we're trying to assist and reach more people.
Maybe one day we can, working with Dr. Scott Stoll, to maybe duplicate such kind of a system in Taiwan so that we can benefit the local participants here. Okay, thank you.
That would be great, Gordon.
Okay. The next question is to effectively increase the intake of total antioxidant capacity. Will you recommend to take antioxidant supplement such as SOD? And then for those supplements such as vitamin B12, what's your opinion and thinking about that?
Yes, very important questions. So first, with the total antioxidant capacity, it's important to step back and kind of look at the whole picture. Dr. T. Colin Campbell has helped all of us to understand, how important it is to look at whole systems. And when we understand how the food works inside of our body, we can begin to see that there are more than 150 different antioxidants in a single meal. And there are more than 5,000 that have been identified in fruits and vegetables and whole foods. One of the challenges then is to identify which antioxidant supplement would be most beneficial, and will it actually work in the body as it may in studies. And so what we're finding is that Many of these antioxidant supplements, including resveratrol, which more than $1 billion has been spent on the research of resveratrol, and more than 20 years looking at its benefits. And finally, it was concluded that resveratrol has no benefit in a supplement form in the human body. It's probably the most well-studied antioxidant supplement. So it tells us that the best way to get antioxidants is whole foods. Whole foods come packed with not just one antioxidant, but hundreds. They also come packed with vitamins, minerals, fiber, and all of those work like a symphony in the body in a synergistic way, in ways that we may not even understand, to promote comprehensive healing throughout the body. Turning on and off switches, working synergistically with the microbiome and other complex biologic systems to heal the body in concert. And so I don't recommend looking for antioxidants in a pill. I recommend finding antioxidants in a beautiful breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And now to answer your second question on vitamin B12, this is a critical nutrient for everybody in the world. For most of human history, people never took a vitamin B12 supplement. Vitamin B12 is manufactured by organisms that live in the soil. And for most of human history, people were connected to soil, growing their own food, drinking water from springs and wells that contain vitamin B12, and in connection with the environment. Today, we have sanitized our food system. We don't grow our own food. We're not connected to soil, and our water is sterilized. And it's actually been found that more than 40% of the population, whether they're vegan or omnivore, are still vitamin B12 deficient. And I like to note that animals are vitamin B12 deficient because they're still feeding them foods that they are not normally designed to eat. They're not grazing, and so they even supplement the animals. And so people that are eating animals are still getting a supplement, just secondary because the animal has been supplemented. But we don't want to miss, as people on a whole food plant-based diet not eating animals, that vitamin B12 is a critical nutrient. And it has irreversible consequences if you're not getting enough vitamin B12, including brain damage. So I recommend for every person to take a sublingual vitamin B12, 1,000 micrograms 2 to 3 times a week, or 500 micrograms daily, either cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin, either source. But that is a nutrient we do not want to miss.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. It looks like your recommendation is for the antioxidant intake, whole food is better than supplement.
That's right.
But for B12, because of the nature, how it makes, you recommend that better everybody take B12 as a supplement.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you to clarify and let us know such detailed supplement issues. The next question is about protein. We heard a lot about if you are vegan or vegetarian, how can you get your protein source? So in Taiwan's diet habit, maybe less legume and nuts intake. So if we don't using like soybeans, what you will recommend for Taiwanese people to take enough protein?
So it's important to realize that every single whole food, fruits, vegetables, leafy greens, all have protein. And they all have all of the essential amino acids. And so if we are eating enough calories from whole plant foods, for the most part, all of us will get the protein that our bodies require. Now, there are some important protein sources that should be considered in a diet. And as you mentioned, Gordon, those are beans and lentils, chickpeas, edamame, whole sources of protein. In fact, when we look at the blue zones, a study that identifies the 5 longest, healthiest lived people groups in the world, the single thing that all of them had in common that led to healthy bodies was a cup of beans every day, which is about 16 to 18 grams of protein. And so, I recommend that anybody transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet, based on the research and the benefits of beans and lentils, look for ways to add beans and lentils to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They can be incorporated into salads, soups, stews, casseroles. They can be sprinkled on food. They can even be eaten, such as my boys like to have beans and greens for breakfast. So there are lots of ways to add in this wonderful source of protein. And I'll just note too, because I think it's important for people to consider the package that their protein is coming in. Many people that are eating omnivore diets that include animals believe that the primary source of protein is meat. But their meat is coming packaged with inflammatory molecules like saturated fat and other molecules and iron inside of the meat that causes inflammation in their body. So they're getting enough protein, but it's causing damage. When we eat protein from plants, it's coming packaged with antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. And so that protein, as we consume it, is causing healing, health, restoration inside of the body. And so, it's important for people to realize that whether you're getting protein from animals or plants, you're still going to get enough protein if you're eating enough calories. But the package of the protein is critically important for disease prevention and reversal. And the plant-based protein wins every single time.
Wow, that's great to know. Another question our participant asked about leafy vegetables. Take it raw or cooked? Do you think when you have a steam or fried leafy vegetable, is that processed or is that healthy? In comparison, which one you will recommend? But if we want to wash them thoroughly, do you have any recommendation to do that effectively? Because of most people will use probably chemical to wash them. So what's your recommendation on leafy vegetables? Eat raw or something like that, please?
Yes, and it's both. So we find that the research shows when we cook vegetables, it releases some nutrients that we would not get if they were raw. And when we eat them raw, we're exposing ourselves to nutrients and phytochemicals that we might not get if they were cooked. And so it's beneficial to eat them both ways. It's also incredibly challenging to eat a 100% raw diet, and it becomes very difficult and leads to many people stopping eating a whole food plant-based diet. So I recommend focusing on both and looking to get as many calories as you can from raw fruits and vegetables, large leafy green salads, raw vegetables and hummus, smoothies, focusing on the raw because it's easy to eat the cooked, and focusing on the leafy greens. But also, substituting lots of cooked vegetables and leafy greens into our soup, stews, casseroles, even steamed leafy greens and onions for a meal. So there's lots of ways to do that. But that will set you free so that you're not on one side or the other, which can be very difficult, but recognizing that both have benefits and trying to get some of both every single day. And regarding washing vegetables, the research has shown that largely if you just wash with soap and water, that will remove the majority of contaminants. So it's very simple, very inexpensive, and easy to do. And so if we're using natural soaps that don't have a lot of chemicals, and we just simply wash it and dry it, they're prepared to eat. And the best is if you actually grow your own, you don't need to wash them. Getting a little bit of soil on your plants or the bacteria that come from the soil in a healthy environment actually help to recolonize the bacteria that live in your gut and keep your microbiome healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. In your speech and your book, we can see a lot of cases to reverse the disease and recover health. Can people just merely rely on such technique without the guidance of doctors or nutritionists, just change their diet to whole food plant-based? If they are taking medicine right now, can they stop taking such kind of prescribed drug?
Yes, this is a very important question. If you're facing a challenging disease that requires medications, I recommend that you work with your healthcare provider to let them know that you're transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet and that it will be critically important to monitor your medications. We find that our health immersions, that people on blood pressure medications and medications for type 2 diabetes may have to have their medications reduced or discontinued in 3 to 5 days. And if they don't, their blood sugars may go too low, as well as their blood pressure dropping too low, and they get lightheaded. And so it is important to work with your doctor. And if your doctor is not willing to work with you, to find a new doctor. That's why we have plantbaseddocs.com. Because you want a doctor that is going to believe in you and work with you and assist you along the way. Anybody can change their diet to a whole food plant-based diet at any time. But if you do have health conditions, it is important that you work with your doctor to make sure that you're safe in the process and that your medications are discontinued at the right time.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. We certainly hope that you can also help us to expanding the plant-based doctor network in Taiwan. Yeah.
Yes, I would be honored to do that.
Thank you. Our participants ask about SDG, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If we're taking whole food plant-based diet as our lifestyle, do you have ready available information how many SDGs we can achieve or at least we can touch?
I don't know the exact number of SDGs that we would actually change, but when we look at sustainability, and actually, just to take one step back, we talk so much about sustainability, and it's not actually the right term. The right term is regeneration. We're in a place in our culture, if we look at the condition of individual health, of our agriculture, of our environment, we're way beyond sustaining. We actually need to move toward regeneration. And so, as we look at the impact of a whole food plant-based diet on individual health, which affects family health, which affects healthcare resource availability, government finances, the environment, the land, the water, the air, CO2. As we look at the potential impact of a whole food plant-based diet on everything from the soil to the air, it is incredibly powerful. And I think it's difficult for us to estimate the SDGs of populations of people making this transition. And I'll just finish with this. I have always been impressed at how quickly the physical body can recover after decades of continuous injury. In just 1 week, the body can begin to heal itself. I have the same hope and belief that the earth can do the same thing. When we begin treating the earth as a system and we begin inserting a whole food plant-based diet as part of the solution, I believe we will see a regenerative capacity in our earth that is shocking to many of us, that it can regenerate and heal itself faster than we might imagine.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. I have counted myself previously. If you are taking a vegan diet, you probably can satisfy 15 out of 17 SDGs. Okay, wow. Maybe we can discuss that later in more detail. When we are approaching the end of this session, before we end this, I would like you to recite again your encouraging word to your children and also to our audiences in Taiwan.
Yes, absolutely. And this comes out of a place of encouraging all of us, with the stewardship mindset, to step in and recognize that all of us have not only responsibility, but the opportunity to begin changing the world around us. One person at a time as we communicate with individuals, one choice at a time as we begin choosing differently what we put on our plate, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One choice at a time how we begin treating the world around us and making a difference where we can make a difference. And so it came from that place. And so I encourage my children every day when we leave the house, I would say to them, I encourage you, my children, to speak life, to use the power of your words to speak life into other people and the world around you, to show love. We're called to be loved, so I want you to show love to people. I want you to share your gift. All of us have been given unique gifts: business, medicine, art, teaching. We can share our gift to transform someone else. And last, to shine our light. In a world where there is darkness, the opportunity for each of us to shine our light every day chases away the darkness. When we turn the lights on in the room, the darkness is gone. When we begin shining our lights, the darkness will leave. So speak life, show love, share your gift, shine your light, and change the world.
就像我常对我孩子们说的，我鼓励他们每一天都要跨出家门，为生命发声，勇敢的去表达爱，散发光芒，发挥天赋，努力的去改变这个世界。我把这句话也送给在座的各位，谢谢你们。Thank you, Dr. Stoll. Our pleasure and honor to have you with us today for your first Virgin experience in Taiwan. Hope we will meet you someday again. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. 我们在后续也有苏醒的一连串的活动。那各位如果扫描荧幕上的 QR code 的话，你可以知道更多哦。谢谢各位，欢迎下次大家再参加科园新生活的活动。谢谢，拜拜。
在这个时候，你还安好吗？在这个时候，你在哭泣吗？在这个时候，我们陷入了慌乱。在这个时候，我们在经历考验。风雨来了，树在摇撼，将天变色，心在呐喊。在这个时候，人们在经历苦难，我们的心却紧紧相连。在这个时候，我们从未有如此坚定信念。再大的风雨 的轻叹。在这个时候，你不要害怕。在这个时候，天使在身边。在这个时候，爱在苦难中绵延。在这个时候，让绝望烟消云散。盼望那风停，盼望那雨后，春暖花开，在天。